Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into a very special episode of the Tech Sideline Podcast. I'm Will Stewart, founder and general manager of Tech Sideline, and I'm your host for today. In this episode, we're going to discuss Virginia Tech's big announcement yesterday of the $400 million Reach for Excellence fundraising campaign for athletics, and we're going to talk about it with two in-studio guests who have played and will play key roles in the campaign. Virginia Tech Vice President for Advancement, Charlie Phlegar, and Virginia Tech Senior Associate Athletic Director, External Operations, Brad Wurthman. That is a mouthful, and those two gentlemen will have a lot to say as well about the Reach for Excellence campaign, how it's structured, what it'll do, where all that money's coming from and going to, and it's all coming up on the TSL podcast right now. Welcome back in after that snazzy introduction. As always, we've got Malcolm Stewart producing and handling all the intros, outros, camera switching, and sound and video editing. So as I've said, this is a very special podcast, not just because who we have as guests, and we'll get to that in a minute, but because this is our first maskless podcast since the beginning of the pandemic. We have surveyed the room, and there is enough vaccination going on here, and there's enough social distancing going on here that we can go without masks, and you guys have no idea how excited that makes me. So, you know, when we first started doing the podcast again after the pandemic started, of course we masked up, and the comments in the YouTube video were, well, you know, get rid of the masks, stop with the virtue signaling and things like that. And so we had to talk about that stuff. And after a while, after about 3 or 4 episodes, that died down. And what's interesting is with the stuff that's going on recently, we've actually started to get those types of comments again. When are you guys going to get rid of the masks? So you guys are here for a very special one. I'm so excited, like I said. So gentlemen, welcome in. And this is going to be a really interesting show. In addition to talking about the Reach for Excellence campaign, we're going to talk about some other stuff, like how the Hokie Club is structured in university development and your roles in that. So we're going to drill down into all that in a minute, but I thought we'd start with the basics, introductions, because I think a lot of our audience probably knows who you are, but a lot of our audience doesn't. So I want to give you guys a chance to talk about yourselves. So Charlie, you are the ranking officer on deck, I believe, so we'll start with you. So when I was writing this up, I looked up your official job title, and it is Virginia Tech Vice President for Advancement. And to me, that makes it sound like you are a vice president in the advancement office. That is not accurate. You are a vice president of the university in charge of the advancement department. So, Charlie, you are a Blacksburg native. So let's talk about yourself. What I'm told about you, and I'll tee you up with this. I'm told that you're very good at what you do, that you could be doing this same job somewhere else, making 2, 3, 4 times the amount that you are making here at Virginia Tech. But you are here because it is this point in your life and you care about this university and you want to help, pardon the expression, advance this university. So talk about yourself.
I appreciate it, Will. One, let me thank you and Chris and Tech Sideline. One, I'm a member, have been for about 5 years now since I came back. Proud member.
So this man reads the message board, folks.
Yeah, I spend way too much time on Tech Sideline, but enjoy it. But I really appreciate the fact that you and Tech Sideline are contributing to the university. You've set up an endowed scholarship, and it's very meaningful. So thank you.
Which is how you and I met. For those that don't know, Tech Sideline is endowing a scholarship in the communications department of Virginia Tech, and it's specifically directed towards Bill Ross' sports media and analytics program.
Right. And
that means that we're donating $100,000 over the course of 5 years, and then the money, the interest and earnings from that will be awarded to a student in that program as a scholarship.
Terrific, thanks.
And Bill told me yesterday, Bill and I talked yesterday, and he said the university, we started this in 2018. And you have to build the principal up to a point before they start awarding money to students. And Bill called me yesterday and said, The university has called me. They're finally able to. We've got enough money in the pot, and we got enough earnings that they're going to start awarding scholarships this fall.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Really,
So anyway, that's how Charlie Phlegar and I met.
Yeah. So I was born in Giles Memorial Hospital in Pearisburg, Virginia, and ended up being in Blacksburg. Went to Blacksburg High School. It no longer exists on Main Street, the one I graduated from.
Yeah.
And graduated from Virginia Tech in '78. Came back in '87 to get a master's degree with the desire to be an athletic administrator. As it turns out, I took a sideways to this fundraising, and I've been involved in that for 30 years. Was fortunate enough to come back to Virginia Tech 5 years ago to be the first VP for advancement. And what that is it's the combination of the fundraising operation, the alumni operation at Virginia Tech, and marketing and university relations. And we combined all three of those under one operation. I report directly to Tim Sands, who recruited me to Virginia Tech. But I think more importantly is all of my family, grandparents, great-grandparents, are all from Southwest Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, this place is really important to me. I love what we do in Blacksburg and this area. And part of that is Virginia Tech athletics. And I'm old enough to be able to say I was in the first game in Cassell Coliseum.
So you were sitting on the concrete.
I was younger, but I was there. I was in the first game at Lane Stadium. I was in the national championship game in New Orleans. This is something that is really, really important to me. Unfortunately, I lose a lot of sleep on weekends when we win or lose. It doesn't matter. So maroon and orange is pretty deep in my family. And we'll talk a little bit about that this morning, why this is so important to Southwest Virginia, and it just simply is critical. So I am fortunate and pleased to be back here.
So let me ask you a trivia question. That first game in Cassell, I don't know the number, but I believe that still holds the attendance record, right? Wasn't it something like 11,000 people?
I think they packed about 11,300 in there.
Yeah.
It was.
Because the seats were not in yet.
The seats were not
in. And the fire marshal kind of had to look the other way that night, right?
I was not interested in basketball at that age. I was more part of Cokes and popcorn and things like that.
So my dad is a Virginia Tech grad. He graduated in 1959, and I remember we lived in Radford. I mostly grew up in Charlottesville, but we lived in Radford from 1969 through 1974. And I remember my dad brought us over to Cassell one day and took us inside. And vertigo's a strong word, but I was a little kid, and that place was big, and those seats were steep. And you know, I know you're all here for something else, but I'll tell a story. It was very windy that day. And when I was a little kid, you're talking 5 years old, I was scared of the wind because I'd been outside one time and it was blowing so hard it blew me around. So I had a dream shortly after visiting Cassell Coliseum where I was outside and it was a really windy day in Blacksburg. Even when I was 5, I knew that's how Blacksburg rolls. And I was having this dream that the wind was blowing me along and I was out of control. And I was outside Cassell and I was kind of flying by the side entrances of Cassell, and one of them, my parents were waving, and I was like screaming like "Elf," you know. So boy, was that a tangent. So let's get back on topic here, and now we'll introduce Brad Wurthman. And Brad, you and I have known each other. How long have you been at Tech?
It'll be 4 years in August.
So you and I have known each other pretty much that whole time.
Yes, sir.
And I've watched you enough to know that you make the mistake of being a positive guy who does whatever is asked and does a good job at it. So therefore you get a bunch of work piled on you, don't you? So anyway, tell us about your career and how you wound up here and what you're doing now.
For sure. Different than Charlie, I am not a Hokie by birth or by degree, right? But I am a Hokie by choice. And I hope that counts for something in this process, because I'm a Hokie by choice, and similar to Charlie, speaking of him being born in Giles Memorial, our son was born in Carillion in Radford. So, and my wife won't let me forget it. He was born 17 days after she arrived here, right? So I still think I'm paying off that debt and will be for quite some time to her. But what is great about that is, I've had the chance to have our son Owen, affectionately referred to as Juice. I've had the chance to have him experience Hokie games, and I mean, he sat there watching the NCAA tournament game with me, booing the Gators, which was awesome. We tried to teach him to love everybody, but in that moment I was like, it's okay. But
now how old is he?
3. He will be 4 in October.
So you're teaching him to boo at the tender age.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or did he do it on his own?
Absolutely. We're all for sportsmanship unless you're playing the Hokies, right? And then we have a job to do. We have games to win. So, but that's it's important to me to acknowledge that, because I don't have the benefit of years and years of history here, but I am a student of our history. Right. And I take it really seriously that I'm entrusted in a variety of ways, as is Charlie, as is Whit, as is the rest of our team. We're entrusted to be stewards of this program that has achieved these amazing highs, and it's our job to get it back to that. My background, I grew up just outside of Toronto in Hamilton, Ontario, worked in the Canadian Football League a while up there. Left there, went to the University of Cincinnati, spent 7.5 years there.
Is that where you met Whit?
It is.
Okay.
Yep. So Whit and I worked together at Cincinnati. He left to come here. I left to go to the University of Illinois, and then he called in the summer of 17 and said, hey, if you'd like to come and join the team here, we'd love to have you. This part of the story is only important because it shows my belief in him and my belief in where we're headed as an organization and as an institution. I committed to Blacksburg, Virginia, sight unseen. He called and I said yes, and then I called him back and I said, hang on, I probably need to talk to Shannon first. And went home and talked to Shannon about it, and she said, well, of course we're going to say yes. Of course we are. And packed up and moved, and that was that, right? So my first time ever setting foot in the Commonwealth of Virginia was getting off the plane in Roanoke the night before I met our staff for the first time. Okay. Say hi everyone, I work here now. But yeah, sight unseen, fully committed, fully locked in, and it's a privilege to be here.
And your role here has been an external relations guy, basically, right?
It has been.
So what umbrella does that include?
Yeah, so until recently, the external relations umbrella was limited in scope to a marketing team, ticketing, all of our creative and content design, our communication space, the ACC network in more of the content delivery role than the technical aspect, and our corporate partnership realm. So everything that. And then roughly late 2019, we had some transition in our shop, and that's when the Hokie Club and what fundraising can be for us moved into this external relations arm, and we've expanded that and had the opportunity to kind of work through where that lives in our overall process.
All right, so let's get into that. We're going to talk about the campaign for excellence and a lot of that stuff, but I'm also interested in, and I think tech fans need to know. So Brad mentioned kind of reorganization of things in October of 2019, and historically, particularly for somebody like me who's been following tech athletics for many years and covering it for about 25 years, we are used to the Hokie Club. Lou Merritt is head of the Hokie Club. Bill Lanson is head of the Hokie Club. And when Bill transitioned out, and he wound up, I think, at the University of Arkansas now, fundraising down there, there was no announcement of a replacement as the head of the Hokie Club. So Charlie, let's toss it over to you. I don't have a strong grasp of the history of who was of under what umbrella the Hokie Club laid or lies. So kind of go over the structure, because this is important. I think people need to know, is the Hokie Club run by the athletic department? Is it part of the university? How does all that work, and how has it changed in recent years?
Well, I think it's changed pretty radically. It's changed radically in the last 12 months, and Brad will talk about that in a minute. But upon my arrival, technically the Hokie Club jointly reports to Whit Babcock and to me in my role. I think on paper that's the way it looked. I don't think that's the way it was operating when I got here 5 years ago. It's taken multiple years of trust, one that people in athletics could believe that I had their best interests at heart, that I was someone who understood athletics, and that if we would start to align ourselves a little bit better, we could have a better organization. And it actually has taken 5 years, and you're going to hear details about that in just a minute. Historically around the country, these are separate operations.
Okay.
And I've worked in the Southeastern Conference at the University of South Carolina, where my eyes were wide open about what athletics could be. to an institution, the difference between a South Carolina and Virginia Tech, and this was 20 years ago, there was a huge difference. But typically they're very separate. And separate is usually not good.
So I know people in advancement for the university, and you hear it. There was always this university advancement and the Hokie Club, I would say, kind of looking askance at each other like, I'm pitching this guy to donate to athletics. Well, I'm pitching this guy to donate to academics. And is it fair to say that you sometimes wound up with people competing for a limited amount of dollars for different pools?
Yeah, you do. I think today, it's not to say that we don't still have some of that
Sure.
going on,
Yeah.
but we communicate better. We meet and discuss things. In the end of the day, it's not our money. It's the donors' money, and they almost always give their money to what they're passionate about, and we try to make that easier for them, and that's what we're attempting to do. I'm excited about the merger. I'm excited about the alignment. I think you're going to begin to see some new things happening that we've not done in the past. Now, let me make really clear, the Hokie Club under Bill and Lou and John Moody and Jack Prater and people before done a superb job. They put together the whole ticket concept. They did amazing work in capital projects, and the infrastructure that you see there now is because of the excellent work of the Hokie Club. The staff there, very dedicated to Virginia Tech, skilled at what they do. We need to add more people, which we're doing. Mm-hmm. We need to integrate some things that have been missing, which we can talk about. And so the future should be very bright. But a lot of good work. And I read the blogs, I read the message boards. I understand that we need to get better in certain areas, but quite honestly, in certain areas, we're quite good.
Yeah.
And we need to celebrate that.
Yeah. Yeah. The Hokie Club is a favorite whipping boy.
Yeah.
And so you said Brad wanted to talk more about kind of what's happened in the last year.
One I should say about Brad is he is positive, and that certainly helps when you're trying to do something difficult. And we can talk a lot this morning about the blessing of COVID. And I think COVID in this case really helped us. It gave us the pause that we needed to reevaluate some things, to think about
I think that's
things.
happened to a lot of businesses.
It has. In the alignment of what we're doing, it allowed Brad to start to get his arms around it. It allowed me to understand Brad a lot more, for Whit and Brad and I to have conversations, and to align what athletics is doing with what I just spent 3.5 years doing at the university level, and really optimistic. We've got work to do. Mm-hmm. It's a work in progress.
A lot of it.
But this might be a great opportunity. I think that you'll see Brad as the person that oversees athletic external relations, of which the Hokie Club is a component piece of that. Yep. And embedded inside the Hokie Club are some of our really skilled people like David Everett and Terry Bolt, and some of the people that the audience knows quite well.
Yeah.
They're essential to what we're doing, but Brad might be able to give you an overview of what we're trying to do going forward.
Certainly. So there's a few ways that I can skin it, right? And there are a few ways that we can talk about it. Prepping for today, quite frankly, I thought what I don't want to do is stand up here or sit up here and bore everybody, right? Because there are times we could put a chart that says, hey, here's our org structure and here's our total chart and here's where everybody lives. But that's probably not what everybody wants to hear, right? And in part of this, we want people to listen. So I don't want to bore everyone. Charlie's point, though, is so valid when you think about the fact that he's gone through a transition like this, and the entire operation that he's responsible for has gone through a transition like this and has achieved success on the back end of it, right? It doesn't mean that it wasn't successful previously. What it means is that it has the opportunity to be more successful now. So when we really boil down what it all amounts to, there are a few, at the risk of talking about it too in depth, there are a few central points, right, that we want to make sure that the folks listening understand and that our business is represented correctly. The first one is our goal is to have a unified view of our fan, right, and a personal view of our fan when possible. Having one department, right, one overall program that has all of these touch points for people, wherever that may be, if that's hey, you only buy tickets to the biggest game on our schedule every year, or it's you donate at a transformational level, or you only buy hats, right? That there are ways within that space to corral you in and put you down whatever path you'd like to go down. To Charlie's point, people give to what they want to give to. It's the same with us. If you live in California and claim Hokie status, you may not buy season tickets. It doesn't mean that we can't reach out to you and have you contribute to the program and contribute to the cause. So when we boil everything down, again, it goes into a unified view of a fan and then our ability to deliver business objectives against that view.
Right.
When we take the entire operation, you think about the Hokie Club, we talk a lot in our group about functional expertise. And where are our functional experts? We are blessed to have, and I'll pick on one group in particular, we're blessed to have an amazing creative team, right? From the videos that are produced and the graphics that are made and the design that happens, we're blessed to have a incredibly talented people in that space. Let's let them do that, and let's let them support fundraising in that effort. Instead of saying the Hokie Club needs to be an all-encompassing entity, right? And they need to do their own design work or whatnot. No, we have this talented team. Let's just let them participate. And so when we boil down the totality and when we think about reimagining what our future looks like, it comes into 5 key areas that are fairly straightforward, but I want to make sure I hit them just quickly. The first one is this team that will be our brand advancement program. That is for people who study business and whatnot. It's our marketing and communications team, right? We'll just call it something fancier because we're in athletics and it's more fun this way. So our brand advancement team gives us the opportunity to connect with donors and fans and customers. I think that's important too. We have to think about people as customers. Our business has changed, right? We want to get back to, this is an important point that I want to make sure I hit. We're ready to get back to the Terror Dome. Right, that's what we want. We were sold out from 98 to 2013. We'd like to be sold out from 2021 and forever.
Yeah.
That's the plan. How we do that looks different than it used to. It was at one point season tickets only, right? And that was the way. That is not the trend nationally. And so this brand advancement team that I talk about, the hope is to reignite the Terror Dome and the Cauldron of Noise and everything that when the earth literally shakes, right? That's the goal for part of that team. Then we move into the second bucket of staff and personnel, our championship resources team. Pretty straightforward. That includes ticket sales and service, fundraising, and everything in that space that connects those two. That could be anywhere on the spectrum between a transactional opportunity, right? Somebody purchasing a hat.
Just buying a ticket or buying a hat.
Buying a ticket, buying a hat. I would argue in some ways transactional fundraising even, right? When we launched the Mike Young popcorn box after the UVA game in January, that's an opportunity for people to participate. That's what it is, right? And Charlie, I've learned this from him. It's all about growing the base of support. And if we do that and we find a way for somebody to be engaged, well, now it's our responsibility to have strategy that says, hey, Will, you participated in a popcorn campaign. Did you know that your contribution goes to help student athlete scholarships? And if not, here's what we can tell you about that. Here's how you can be involved at a higher level. So on this spectrum of transactional to philanthropic to transformational giving, we want to have opportunities in that space for everybody. So brand advancement, championship resources. The third area of our organization that I'm really excited about is what we will call our digital strategy and innovation team. That amounts to, we're stealing that from the NBA. That will be one of the few teams in the country that we as an organization are one of the few collegiate athletic programs that will be structured this way. But this digital strategy and innovation team, the Orlando Magic, were one of the first ones to open this up. And what it amounts to is everything is interconnected, right? Everybody has a digital footprint. It's our job to unlock that and then integrate our assets into your digital footprint. That's what this team has the opportunity to go do. They will work as a catalyst across our entire business. And so that is one that you will see us improve in the digital space. That's everything from mobile apps to digital content, you name it, it's in that space. The fourth bucket of this category is our business operations and technology team. That is the bedrock of what we do. At the end of the day, and we can convolute it and we can come up with fancy names, we can do whatever we want. one of the key points of our business is to make sure that if Will Stewart, this donor and season ticket holder, has a ticket, that he can scan into the game with no problems, right? Like that's an important point to make, because there are times that we can overcomplicate that. The goal is you're able to attend the game and have a good time.
Does that part of it also include the management of the massive amounts of user data and the history of donating and all that stuff?
Yes, which is we were talking about before, right?
We were talking about before we started recording how difficult it is. And the example I gave when we were chatting was you've got somebody who's been buying season tickets since 1959, and that was a piece of paper in a file folder somewhere. And it's hard to get all of that stuff integrated into whatever your current system is.
Correct. So that team is charged with that. That team is charged with making our business simpler for our fans.
Right.
You know, again, when you boil it down, that's what they're charged with. And then finally, the ACC network obviously is such a massive opportunity, and it's so important to what our future looks like, that is the concept of getting content to your screen. And your screen could be a digital device, it could be a television, it could be a tablet, whatever the screen is. It's the concept of getting content to your screen. So again, just to reiterate and summarize those 5 areas: brand advancement, championship resources, digital strategy, business operations and tech, and the ACC network, for lack of a more eloquent term. Those 5 areas will be what drives our connection points with our fans. Our hope is that we can reach out and connect on an emotional level. And again, it all drives back to end result objective. Let's get this place sold out and get it back to the Terror Dome. That's the point.
Are you looking to create a personal experience for everyone, even though it is this massive system? And this is a random example I thought of while you were talking. I will go to basketball games and I'll typically buy a giant, when we're allowed to go to basketball games, in the distant past.
Hopefully soon.
I would just buy a giant Diet Coke and annoy my row mates with having to get up and go to the restroom several times during the game. But that's a different story. Do you see a future where I go in, I scan my ticket, and it says, it sends me an offer? Says, hey, get your Coke cheaper with some cheap popcorn. Do you foresee that level of granularity and stuff like this?
Yeah. Absolutely. And there are technologies and platforms that are out there that are able to do those things.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're having conversations with a variety of companies in that space to try to make it work, right? And I think that's important. One thing that I would want to make sure that people know, we will never be perfect at our business,
right?
But that's not our goal, right? Our goal is progress. And that means we have to be able to acknowledge, hey, we weren't great on this day, or we didn't hit a home run today. But let's not lose sight of the fact that we did hit a really strong stand-up triple, right? And how can we improve that beyond the shadow of a doubt? So to answer your question directly, yes, absolutely, we want to have granular experiences. We want to be able to make it as seamless as possible, because it has to be as seamless as possible, because that is the expectation from our fan, because that is the expectation day to day. Think about how many times, and I'm on the high end of the millennial side, right? I think about I would hope people would say that I'm a patient person. I'm not patient when apps don't work. Right? I am not patient in that moment. I will shut you down in 3 seconds. It has to work when I click it. Otherwise, I've moved on to something else.
So I've asked for questions from you guys from our subscriber message board, and one of them was one of our more smart alecky posters. If Charlie, if you spend time on the board, you'd recognize him. He said, "When's the website going to work better?" That kind of thing.
Soon.
Soon. And the Hokie Club currently does not have an app per se, correct? Or will that be? Well, again, we don't want to drill too far down into this stuff. We could talk about that for hours. But
yeah, and so let me try to bring it back up a little bit. The goal is to give everybody a seamless experience, right? And it is ideally to be personal, significant, and unexpected sometimes.
Yeah.
We want to find a way, and you think about Lane Stadium, you think about the Terror Dome, you think about what it can be, and I say this as my first game in Lane Stadium, we played Delaware. And it still was one of the most impressive environments I've ever seen, right? We had 46,000 people in the building, and it rocked.
Yeah.
And I remember standing down, because I said, you know what, I'm going to stand down by the tunnel. It's my first game in Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech. I'm going to stand down by the tunnel and experience this. Everything that I've seen on TV, I want to experience it in real life. And I remember standing there and thinking, this may be the coolest thing I've ever been a part of. And it was against Delaware. It wasn't versus Clemson 3 weeks later.
Night,
it wasn't versus Notre Dame a year later. It was Delaware. So, and that's no disrespect to Delaware. That's just, the big game feel versus the non-big game feel. And that is ultimately, when we bring it back up a level, the goal is just to make it better in all ways. And that could be a website, that is our app, that is all of those touch points. But finding a way, again, if emotion creates connection, then ideally at some point connection will create commerce too. But we have to start on the front end of that.
Yeah, and that's and again, this is another tangent we could spend a while talking about it. It's something that's become more complex and more difficult with as the world evolves, and people get pulled in so many different directions. I was randomly reading something last night that 100 million people watched the O.J. Simpson slow speed pursuit back in 1994, and I just thought, man, that was right when the internet was being birthed, and so much has changed. So
it has changed a lot. I just to emphasize the integration of these component pieces and the five. In the past, if we wanted to launch a $400 million campaign, we would have had to touch all these different people. It would have been very difficult. But with this one, you go to Brad, the strategy is talked about at the highest level. He oversees all of it. So he's able to pull all those pieces in and emphasize what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Much simpler, much better process. Work still to be done.
Absolutely.
But the world has changed, and I think we're starting to keep up with it.
So I think that segues nicely into the campaign. And so there's something I want to, now that we start talking about, there's something I want to clarify right off the bat. When you come out and you say you're having a $400 million campaign over 8 years, I remember before I knew anything about fundraising that I thought that was $400 additional million to what you usually raise. And that's not really the way to think of it. So I'm going to say what I think and then correct me where I'm wrong or affirm it. Years ago, the Hokie Club could bring in $15-20 million a year. And during some of their peak years around the Michael Vick hysteria and maybe through about 2005 or whatever, they got up to $20 to $23 million in donations a year. And some transformational stuff has been done in the last few years that has gotten the Hokie Club to where they are consistently raising anywhere from, I would say, 30 to 33 million a year, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's kind of what you're going to get in a typical year. Now you get some special gifts like the $15 million Student Athlete Performance Center gift, and in that year you're bringing in $47 million. But that's not typical, that's not normal. 30 to 33 million is typical and normal. So in a usual 8-year time frame, if you do the math, that's about $250 million that are being donated to the Hokie Club for various reasons. So when you announce a $400 million campaign, what you're really saying is over these 8 years, we want to bring in $150 million extra over what we ordinarily do. Would you say that's an accurate way to think about it?
One way to look at it, I will say that to bring in $30 to $33 million a year is really hard work. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not you have to understand that they've taken the Hokie Club from roughly 20 million to $33 million is probably the right number over the last 7 years. Now what we're trying to do is take it from a $33 million operation to roughly a $50 to $53 million annual operation. Now, I would say in the past, they've raised the bar by focusing on capital only, capital projects.
Because that's the sexy stuff.
Well, it is sexy, and it's certainly visible, but that has how they focused on that. That's how the numbers have gone up, and they've been quite successful. I mean, one point I'd like to make is that we have some facilities now that the new recruits, because they've not been on campus in 12 to 14 months.
Yep.
They've never seen the performance center.
Yeah.
Best in the country. They've never seen the football weight room. Best in the country. They're going to be blown away, and most of our audience has not seen the new housing. It is spectacular. That will be the best athletic housing in the country. This summer we'll put online a new football players lounge, which will be phenomenal. And so the new recruits have not seen any of that. Those are all capital projects. And so we've been able to kind of keep that $25 to $30 million operation by having capital projects, the Performance Center as an example on top of that. What we have not done a great job on, to be honest, and what we ought to talk a little bit about is the operating budget of the athletic program and being able to sustain a much larger operating budget. And that's what we'll be focused on. Not only the capital, there are some capital needs. Cassell, we can talk about that.
Oh, we will.
That's a huge item. But,
Yeah.
but the day-to-day annual operating budget is what has been an issue for Virginia Tech for some years. And that's what we're trying to address going forward. But to your point, Hokie Club, 30 to 33, 50 to 53, 55 million on an annual sustained basis. That's what we're trying to do.
And
So-
one thing really quickly, if you don't mind, just to jump in there, to Charlie's point, and he and his team have been so helpful in this space, right? And I want to make sure that people understand that the reason that this is possible is because of the collaboration between these units.
And that's what I was going to say. When you were talking, I was thinking to myself that you're proceeding with confidence in this fundraising campaign
Yes,
because of the structural work you've done in the last few years. You know,
Correct.
you are ready as an organization to take that step, and so now you need to communicate to the fans and see if the fans are ready to take that step.
Correct. I mean, we need the fans. We need our alumni and non-alum supporters to step up and help us with this at all levels. I mean, this is, as Witt said yesterday, we're all in on this, and I have no question, no doubt in my mind that we'll be successful because we've seen this happen. We've taken our alumni participation rate in the last 5 years from 8% to 20% this year. It'll probably hit 22% next year.
Now you're talking about university development as a whole,
University-wide. But athletics has doubled,
from 4% to roughly 8%.
roughly 8%. And you think, well, you think it could do more. These are phenomenal numbers. I mean, these 22% will put us at the top of public institutions in the country. So the alumni base is prepared to respond. We're also have gone from averaging about $90 million a year to close to $200 million a year. So we've doubled the fundraising in 4 years. So the Hokie Nation is ready. You got to ask them, and that's what we're trying to do a better job of.
So, and from the outside looking in, I can say that what has been missing from the athletic department, this is a frequent criticism, is a vision of exactly what needs to be done. And I think it's so easy to. It's interesting. The $400 million campaign announced yesterday. There was a clear description of the 5 areas in which it focuses and the dollar amounts associated with most of those areas. Some of it was a little vague, but that's fine. It needs to be. Of the 5 things, of course, the one that got the most juice was the Cassell Coliseum renovation because of the drawings that were associated with it.
Right.
And it's funny because all this conversation had been around funding the football program better. And the Football Enhancement Fund is a big part of that $400 million. But I can tell you that the reaction yesterday was, oh, yeah, okay, that's nice. Look at those pictures of Cassell. You know? But anyway, back to my point is that I think that was an important step yesterday in putting a vision out there and imparting a vision and starting that conversation. So if you guys are ready, I'd like to go kind of into the 5 components of it, unless there's something else you want to address before we start getting specific about it.
Just one critical point that I think I'd like to just address. The alignment, I think COVID gave us a chance to pause and think about some stuff, but I read the message boards. Alignment.
So I think I know where you're headed. So let me jump in here and say, because I think this is neat. Sorry to interrupt, but
please.
I think this is neat. I have written in my notes, let's settle an argument. Virginia Tech President Tim Sands, quote, doesn't care about athletics and hates football, unquote. So
couldn't be further from the truth. This is a man who has a great vision for the university. He loves athletics. He goes to the games. He tapes the basketball, football games. He rewatches the games. He is all in with athletics. He's a university president. He has to represent all aspects of the university. But we talk football all the time, and basketball. So this alignment that you saw yesterday with the president and the AD and the head football coach giving a press conference, that just doesn't happen. And so the alignment of the university to athletics is unique, it's special, and that happens because Tim Sands appreciates the importance of athletics to Virginia Tech. I spent a lot of time with him. Rest assured, he loves athletics. And so that alignment is critical to what we're trying to do now. The future of the athletic operating budget, that alignment is essential to what we're trying to do. And I have 100% confidence that that alignment is in place. And because that alignment's in place, we're going to be very, very successful financially with the goal that Whit stated yesterday, and it's to be in the top third, where Virginia Tech belongs, of the ACC operating budgets for the athletic department. That's where Tech belongs. That's where we're going. Tim has endorsed that. Whit has endorsed that. We are here because we have to implement that in the years ahead. But I hope I made that clear about Tim Sands, because I hear that all the time. I don't answer on the message boards in my role. I don't think it's appropriate. No. But today, please, Tim is all in.
So here's what we will do. We will transcribe that, and I will keep it handy.
Yep.
And when somebody says that on the message boards, I will copy and paste what Charlie Phlegar said about Tim Sands. So great stuff. Appreciate you putting that in there. So to throw some numbers out there now, I did not do this down to the granularity of the ACC. The goal is to move Virginia Tech into the upper third of ACC funding. And did they also say yesterday the upper third of Power 5 funding?
They did.
Because that's pretty ambitious. So to put some numbers on it, if you Google USA Today college sports finances, they do an excellent job of maintaining a database of publicly accessible financial information on athletic departments. I reference it all the time. It's current through the 2018-2019 school year, I believe. I'm surprised they're about a year behind. They need to bring it up to the 2019-2020. But as of fiscal year 2019, so there are 65 Power 5 schools. Only 52 of them publicly report athletic department information. The rest of them, the other 13 schools, are either private schools that don't have to report for public purposes, or there's very rare cases where public universities, I think this takes place in the state of Pennsylvania, they are not required. And I think that includes Pitt and Penn State. So if you look at USA Today's database, 52 of the 65 Power 5 schools are represented in there. And Virginia Tech, as of 2019, $97 million in revenue, which ranked number 42 out of 52 reporting Power 5 schools. And if you add another, let's say 25 million, and you take Virginia Tech up to 125 million in revenue, then as of 2019, which is data that's a couple years old, that would put Virginia Tech at number 27, right behind, interestingly enough, Oregon. But, Oregon's a different animal. There's Oregon's annual budget, and then there's the guy they turn to if they need something.
Correct.
And Oklahoma State is a similar thing. If you I don't know if they still have it. I think T. Boone Pickens has passed away, correct?
Yes.
And I don't know how his family feels about things. But there are certain universities where their operating budget and their resources and capacity to do things are different animals, So that's kind of what Virginia Tech's up against.
Yeah, I think you have to. Sometimes it's apples to apples comparison that get mixed up, and sometimes you're looking at operating budgets. Sometimes capital is thrown in there. Yeah. Sometimes there's other funds. So we did spend the last year interviewing. I personally did.
Yeah, talk about that.
Interviewing athletic directors from other institutions, looking at all the data, trying to understand what it would take. First, I asked Whit, can I help you? Is there something that I can do to be of help in this situation? And to his credit, he's allowed me to get involved, get a little bit more in the weeds than ADs like, and support what we're trying to do. But I needed to understand what that meant. So I'm pretty convinced with the data that we have that to get in the top third of the ACC puts us where we belong, where we need to be. And if we do that, it gets us close to the top third of the Power 65 conferences, schools that Power 5 schools. And then we'll be playing in the right level. Love to be number one. Witt said he would love to be number one in that, but you got to play in the top third of the ACC in your budget, or you're not going to be competitive. So that's what we're going to do. I have 100% confidence we'll get there immediately. I just think that's what will happen.
Mm-hmm. So the one of the $100 million questions, or maybe $400 million, is when and how did the university focus on this start to increase? The question people want answered is, when Justin Fuente almost left and went to Baylor, did that create an awareness at the university level that previously didn't exist? Or, how would you, and if this is, sorry if this is putting you on the spot, but how would you characterize that?
Well, I will say that for me personally, I will not speak for the university, but for me personally, I just wondered what is going on here. Yeah. And so I asked Witt if I could meet with Justin, which I did. I met with Justin probably 5 times, the 30 to 60 days after that whole Baylor thing happened, just to understand him and what we were up against as a university. And it opened my eyes to the issues that are being addressed now and were announced yesterday. Yeah. Our operating budget is not competitive. Yeah. We have to be more competitive, and in order to do that, this is what it's going to take. So there has been a lot of conversation at multiple levels, both at the university and boards and with Witt. What does it take to be competitive? Yeah. And so yesterday you heard that's what it's going to take to be competitive. Did Justin and Baylor, it hurt. It didn't hurt me, but it opened my eyes. Why would anybody want to leave Virginia Tech? Right. And so when I asked Justin, what do you need? And he started to talk about the 5 points that were mentioned yesterday. Yeah. I was going, UVA has 6 more of those than we do. As a Hokie grad, unacceptable.
Right. So, Brad, when you were talking about your son rooting against the Florida Gators, I thought to myself, hey, he's 3 or 4 years old and he's already learning to dislike orange and blue. So
he's already committed to it.
That is a solid start. Yeah. The way I phrase it to people is, and occasionally when I've interviewed Witt or talked to Witt, I've said, you talk about staffing up and eventually and building glitzier facilities. Eventually, there's a point of diminishing returns, where more people, you're spending more than you're gaining. And so I think as an organization, what you want to do is you want to get to a point where you don't want to be way down here where you're actually limiting the ability of your people to be effective at their jobs. You want to fund them and staff them to a point where you can fully see their talents and their abilities rise to the top. Their hands aren't tied behind them, in other words. Anything more than that is probably just extra and even can become a logistics issue. And this might sound like a weird random thing to say, but I remember when the Longhorn Network was created and ESPN agreed to start paying $15 million a year to Texas. Well, you need to give ESPN something in order for that. And what you need to give them is access and time. And I remember reading an article where Mac Brown, who was the coach there at the time, his attitude was kind of like, I'm already busy enough. You mean I got to let this guy from the Longhorn Network follow me around and I have to allocate X number of hours a week to talking into his microphone? And you could argue that that's actually a detriment to Mac Brown and his football program. That, yeah, it brought in $15 million more a year, which sounds great, but at some point there's a point of diminishing returns. But it would be nice to be bumping your head against that, as opposed to being woefully underfunded and understaffed. So that's what
I think, and we can talk about that, about what football needs. I mean, football funds 90% of our athletic budget. It's really important, and it generates $100 million of economic impact for Southwest Virginia. I'm not sure I want to live in this area without Virginia Tech and athletics, because the restaurants and stores. We need that influx of capital. But Justin in football and what he needs, he's never once said, I need glitzy sliding boards and spas and things like that. He's been very pragmatic, but clear that we cannot be competitive without these certain things.
Yeah.
I would argue that our capital facilities are pretty good. They're some of the best in the country. Now we need to address some of the other issues, and we could clarify some of the money that will flow to football, because I got a lot of on the message board, well, what does this $30 million mean, and how will that be spent, and things like that.
I'm ready to get right down into that.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get into the 5, as Brad likes to say, touch points of the campaign. So Football Enhancement Fund is the first thing, and again, let's clarify. So you're talking about specifically out of the $400 million, $30 million will be allocated towards additional funding to football over and above what is currently done. Now, this $30 million, conceptually, the way to think about it is that it is spread out over time. It's not $30 million a year extra. It's $30 million extra over the 8-year course of the campaign. Would you say that's fair?
That is fair.
Okay. So the $30 million, and so the $30 million is going to break down like this: recruiting, support, and staffing, $5 million. And again, one of the mistakes I see being made on Twitter is, we're going to spend $5 million a year on recruiting, support, staff. No, that's $5 million that's spread out over, let's say, for purposes of discussion, 8 years.
Well, just to clarify a point there,
correct.
That's $5 million a year coming from the philanthropic side. Okay. If a donor wants to give us $5 million and say spend it the first year for recruiting, it would be spent in the first year.
Okay.
It's likely that $5 million, when you say over 8 years, that $30 million is probably going to be over a 5-year period.
Right.
In this case,
because it's now going to start coming in,
and so that's the philanthropic piece. Now there are other revenue sources coming in.
Correct.
From various sources. It could be university sources. It could be revenue from ACC Network that the AD and the head football coach would make decisions on. Our job is to make sure we generate the 30 philanthropically to enhance the football piece, and there are other revenue sources coming in. I can tell you Justin is going to be quite pleased if we generate this kind of money over and above what he's currently getting. So
and Will, that is an important point of clarification. So yes, there's approximately $30 million on the sheet, right? There's also the cost of scholarships. There's the cost of the nutrition center. There are other elements in this. What's been great about it is with Charlie's help and Whit's help and the whole deal, this gives us an opportunity to evaluate what do we need to operate, and then what do we need to expand to help our operation. And it's not, with the influx and the ability to move this program forward, what's important is that we don't lose sight of the necessities either, right? It's not just bells and whistles, and something that, and having worked with a variety of football coaches over my career, we're really fortunate with Coach Fuente because he doesn't ask for glitz and glamour. He asks for things that directly impact our student athletes and directly impact the program. And at first, right, the priorities were we needed to update the weight room because, right or wrong, and this is not a negative, the weight room was not up to par with our competitors. And so showing that off to recruits was not a great point.
Well, it was about a 6,500 square foot weight room.
Correct.
And the standard these days, and the example I always throw out on our message boards is when Colorado State built a new football stadium, they incorporated a 13,000 square foot weight room into it. So
Colorado State.
That means that Colorado State's weight room was twice as large and more modern than Virginia Tech's.
Correct. And so now that we have the opportunity to compete and recruit with these facilities, again, you had mentioned something earlier about like Cassell and the images and the renderings of Cassell picked up the steam. It's because those are fancy. Yeah. Again, we said at the beginning, I'm not going to stand up here and walk you through an org chart because org charts are boring, but org charts get work done. And where a lot of the investment in football is going to go is into the org chart.
Yeah.
It's into the opportunity to recruit. It's into player development. It's into these items that mean something to those of us who work in this business every day, but can't necessarily fit into a soundbite or a rendering to share out publicly. So this is about nuts and bolts, right? This is about bolstering the program in a way that has not happened historically, that gives us an opportunity to be competitive, because we already have facilities now that have just opened that are best in class. Whit said it yesterday. Two things. The concept of going from a challenger to a champion brand, right? You have to have the resources to become a champion. We're getting there. Then it's the fact that, and in the Q&A point, and candidly, I was proud of him for saying that, because he is humble about this. Why can't we be the leader in some of these spaces? You know, you look at our performance center, to Charlie's point, it is as good as anybody's dining facility in America. So let's not shy away from that. Let's lean into that and tell people. And it's hard because Southwest Virginia, and the thing that I love about living here, it's charming, right? And it is humble, and it doesn't talk about what we have. But in that space, we're being out-recruited if we don't. And so now let's put it forward and say, not negatively recruiting against anyone else, but if you would like to participate and eat in the best dining facility in America, conveniently, that's in Blacksburg, Virginia.
And to drill in on something even more subtle there is, let me see how it's phrased. Let me grab my sheet of paper and see how it's phrased. Student athlete development.
Yes.
$2 million. And, you know, one of the things that if you follow recruiting, and not like I follow it super close, but I follow it, I believe it was Devin Ford who, running back from I think Northern Virginia, that everybody thought Virginia Tech had a really good shot at. And he visited Penn State, and he came away making this statement, and this is how Penn State pitches themselves. I'm not saying Virginia Tech doesn't. Mm-hmm. He said Penn State is a place where they will take care of you not just for the next 4 years, but the next 40 years. Mm-hmm. And what that means is he has been, during the recruiting process, he has been exposed to the student athlete development piece that you don't see from the outside. How much academic support is there? How many sheer people are helping me with academics? How many people are training me for a future career in simple things like making up a resume and interviewing for a job and providing opportunities? You know, that kind of stuff is, you can't put it in a drawing, like you said.
You can't. And what is, it's an important point to harp on for the fan base, right? And the donor base. They see the majority of our student athletes. Let's take football. The majority of the work they see those young people put in is Saturdays for 3.5 hours. We see them 7 days a week, right? And we see them going to class. We see them with their tutors. We see them with their academic advisors. We see them with their career development staff. Our student athlete development staff does a great job with all of our student athletes. What this amounts to is the total Hokie experience. It's not just 3 hours on Saturday. It's also Monday, and it's Tuesday, and it's our sports psychologist working with our student athletes on performance issues or concern.
Or the mental effects of quarantining.
Correct.
In this case.
There's so many elements. Again, that it's not shocking that Cassell as a renovation gets play, because the pictures look great, and we can't wait to open it. But we've already, if this campaign had launched a year ago, we would have had pictures of the rendering of the weight room in that moment. We would have had renderings of the performance center. We would have had renderings of these other elements as well. The nice part, and the part that can't be lost, is that those pieces are in play. They are open. They are open for business. They are open for recruiting. They are open right now, being recruited to. So it is now we focus inwardly. And it's less about, and again, the weight room, using the weight room as an example, to hear Coach Hilgart talk about it, he doesn't talk about the fact that it's glitz or glamour, or there aren't slides in there. Everything that's in there is important. There's 2 points that I would make that he talks about. One is the number of athletes who can work out at the same time has nearly doubled from what it used to be. 2, and I love this for him because I joked with him about it when I saw them. We have 175-pound dumbbells in the weight room. And I said, Coach, who can lift those? Who uses those? And he said, well, maybe only 1 or 2. But the key is, if our max is 100, then the guy who can lift 100 thinks he's strong. And so to hear Coach Hilgart talk about, again, student athlete, that's a simple example and a simple anecdote that shows student athlete development. We spent money on dumbbells that 1 or 2 guys can lift. He didn't spend it because he wants them to lift them. He spent them because he wants the guys who can lift 100-pound dumbbells to know that they can get better.
To know that there's something more.
Correct. To know they can do more. But those are the elements, right, that it's hard to put that into a tweet. It's hard to put that into a press conference clipping. It's easy to put that into practice. Yeah. But we have the capacity to do that now.
Yeah, and he talked about just the efficiency of the stations that they're building.
Absolutely.
Days. You don't do squats here and then go over there and do bench press.
Everything can happen in one rack.
In one place. And so you talk about square footage. So what if, let's bring up Colorado State again, what if their stations aren't as efficient? Their weight room is the same size as Virginia Tech's weight room now, but what if it can't be used as efficiently? Then Virginia Tech has an advantage that you can't necessarily see. So they're also going to put money into assistant coach salaries, quality control coaches, student athlete development, and that's 4 of the 5 items on the football enhancement fund. And as they said yesterday, that's all about staffing and people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really important to clarify the assistant coach salary pool. We need to be able to retain great coaches.
Vance Weiss cough. Who makes $350K a year.
So we need to do what's appropriate there. This is going to allow us to do that. I do not think we'll lose coaches over money. I mean, their career, people want to go different, family issues. It should never be about money. And I think this addresses that. And we've got some amazing assistant coaches right now.
Yeah.
I can speak too as well, having been at different places and being with different coaching staffs. I've had the privilege of getting to know our coaching staff personally. They are, and this is not me saying it because I'm on the payroll, and they are incredible humans who care about our kids, and they care about winning games. I promise you, right? And I just want to make sure that the same as Charlie talked about, Dr. Sand's commitment to athletics. Our coaches are getting our guys ready, and you can see it in the camaraderie that they have and the family atmosphere that they produce. And there are simple examples that, again, won't resonate for everyone, but I want to make sure that I use them. I brought Owen to football practice last summer during training camp, and he's out there and he loves Coach French Fry. All right, that's his favorite, Coach Fuente.
Okay.
He couldn't say Fuente at one point, so he went with Coach French Fry. He loves him some Coach French Fry.
Oh, and it's out there in the public domain now.
I know. Yeah. And he is sitting in the stands yelling for Coach French. We are the only 2 people in Lane Stadium. We're the only 2 that are sitting in the stands. And he, in his 2.5-year-old voice, is screaming at the top of his lungs and waving at Coach French Fry, who is very clearly occupied. And I'm sitting there, and I'm not sure whether to be embarrassed or nervous, or and at the end of practice, I'm standing down there, and Owen's running around the field, and Coach comes running over and high fives him and is like, "I could hear you out there. Thanks for cheering us on."
Wow.
And so I promise you, I've worked with other people who that would not have been the reaction, right? That would not have been the message. So we're really fortunate to have that, and we're gonna get it done. We've got the right people. You heard Whit say it yesterday. You've heard Charlie say it. You've heard me say it. We've got the right people in the right places. Now we're just giving them the resources to go get it.
I think funny things. I was imagining if you were at Alabama, if he would be up there yelling, "Coach Saden, Coach Saden."
I don't know that I would have been employed much longer at that point. So
I can see the look from Nick Saban.
Exactly.
So one thing I do want to pin you guys down on, if you can. I tried to pin Whit down on it yesterday, but he danced around it. The 5th part of the football enhancement fund is capital/facility needs, $8 million. I tried to ask Whit if he had anything specific in mind, and I tried to suggest that maybe there's. See, I got a thing that I'm kind of preoccupied with. I look at the Merriman Center, and I look at Jamerson and the Student Athlete Performance Center, and I look at the space in between them, which, by the way, is where I think Coach Fuente's office is. But it's mainly kind of tunnels walking back and forth between the 2. I eyeball that space, and I'm like, you can fit some football stuff in there. You look under the Student Athlete Performance Center, there's an open area underneath there that, unless there's something I don't know about, stuff can be built in there. So I asked Whit, what specific thoughts have you had in mind, and have you thought about maybe as part of the Cassell renovation doing something around that back end? And we have been asked, can you ask Charlie and Brad specifically for football facilities, what's next? Is there anything concrete in mind, or are you just allocating money for future ideas?
Well, you can add to what I'm about to say.
Sure.
What I have heard from Coach Fuente is that there are a couple things that we do need. The Players Lounge is going to get done this summer, so we'll knock that one out. The whole sports medicine area, the hot tubs, the cold tubs, the wrapping stations, there's some upgrade that needs to happen in that area. So that will be one of the capital things that I think will be addressed. I do think there are probably some coach's office, some analyst's office, some recruiter's offices. I know that Whit and Justin are talking about how to get that done. That will get done. I don't personally think, I shouldn't probably say that, I don't think we need a brand new standalone football facility. I've never heard Justin say that. I've heard it on the message boards, but the Jamerson Center and the Merriman Center and
Correct.
the Performance Center and all that stuff together with a renovated Cassell Coliseum with some of the spaces you just mentioned can address our full needs. That's part of the capital piece, and probably a bit more over the $8 million that's listed there. But again, there's other resources flowing into this. Have you heard anything differently, Brad?
No. It's and Whit addressed it a little bit yesterday in the press conference. It's not that we need a football only facility. It's that we need to continue to invest in football facilities.
Right.
Right. And that may include coaches' offices. That definitely includes sports medicine areas. But the reason it includes coaches' offices is not because the current coaches' offices aren't nice and pleasant to sit in. It's because as we add staff, we need somewhere for them to go.
Need somewhere to put them.
Right. But does that require building a X thousand square foot standalone building? No, not if we can work within the current footprint. So especially like in most, go with me on this, in most football only facilities, the things that are included in football only facilities are coaches' offices, meeting rooms, weight room, and nutrition center. Maybe you'll include a recruiting lounge,
Barbershop,
which
Nap
is
room.
not going to happen here, right? Everything that I've just listed there that would fit into a football only facility, we either have or are in the process of upgrading.
Yeah.
Right? So the concept that we need a football only facility is incorrect, provided we acknowledge that we are not done upgrading facilities. Right? Like that.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction. It's not either or. It could be an and. We could do all of those things and have it across a hallway. That's not a problem. It's just figuring out what those pieces are.
Yeah. And so I got a son that goes to South Carolina. I've been down there and seen where South Carolina built their football facility. And it's funny because Virginia Tech is perceived as a rural campus and South Carolina is in the city of Columbia. But they had a large flat amount of space where they did that. It was easy for them to say, we're going to plunk it right here. So I get what you're saying. So
I worked at South Carolina for 5 years
Yeah.
in the current same role that I have here at Virginia Tech, and worked with Lou Holtz. I wouldn't trade Virginia Tech's facilities, location, ambiance of a game day with South Carolina for any amount of money. Big SEC conference, 85,000, great experience, but it's in the middle of a flat, field off from the campus. It's not a beautiful area. And I just think that we have the facilities here that will allow us to be very, very competitive.
Well, and the other thing coaches talk about, the other thing that the standalone buildings bring is efficiency to things. I remember Frank Beamer years ago talking about, the practice fields used to be across the street from Lane Stadium. And, the NCAA limits your amount of practice time. So anytime you have to spend picking up your stuff and walking across the street is time lost. And he was specifically talking about how they had moved the baseball field out to where it is now and had put the football practice fields closer to everything else. So I think we've beaten that topic up pretty good. But I did just want to get...
We could talk about it for hours.
Did want to cover that. So Let's talk about the Cassell Coliseum renovation. And Charlie, I want to ask you this because you grew up in Blacksburg, and you're out there in the fundraising. I think that when you talk about putting that much money in the Cassell Coliseum, and this goes right back to the discussion we just had about a football facility, there is a portion of the now, I will say this: when I put out the renderings of Cassell on the Tech Sideline Twitter feed, I put out the 4 pictures. And as of this morning, I can't remember. I think we were talking about this before we started recording. I don't think this was after we started recording. As of this morning, that tweet with those pictures had been quote tweeted close to 40 times, and all but 2 of them were positive. People are really blown away by it. But I also and I look at Malcolm's generation, and I know that he and his buddies are actually bigger basketball fans than they are football fans. So that's an interesting thing that's occurring. So what all this discussion is driving towards is, I think people underestimate. I think you're more emotional and fiscally able fans are motivated to donate to the Cassell project, because I went to Tech in the 80s, 1983 through 1987. Tech basketball fell off a cliff after that. But at 56 years old, basketball resonates with me in the way that it might not resonate with a 35 to 40-year-old who was formed in the crucible of Michael Vick and Frank Beamer. So there's this whole thing going on. So my question for you, when you go out and you talk to the big money donors who tend to be older and maybe have fond recollections of some of the glory days of Virginia Tech basketball, is this a program is this a concept, renovating Cassell, that has juice and is easy to sell?
Well, it has juice and it's easy to sell. Virginia Tech has never raised, ever in its history, $50 million for a building. And so this will require a lot of work and sacrifice and dedication from the Hokie Nation to pull this off. So that's one. The older generations, which I guess I'm getting into, we love Cassell Coliseum. We respect it. It's an important icon of this area. I think the people that I've shown the renderings to, they think it's fantastic, excited about it. It's a little bit of a knockoff of Littlejohn Coliseum in Clemson and the renovation they did. There's some elements that would look like to that. I would also say, in all honesty, I wish during game days in Lane Stadium and Cassell that we could move the stadium to the middle of Richmond or Northern Virginia, and we had a fan base of multiple millions of people that could come to the game.
Can you
we
imagine?
are in Blacksburg.
Yeah.
You know the location. So for football, we can pull it off. For basketball, a couple nights a week, it's hard for us to imagine generating 20,000 fans for a basketball game on a Tuesday night in Blacksburg, Virginia. And you have to have that kind of attendance with suites to generate the cash flow to pay the debt on a building that would probably be new, upwards of $200+ million. Yeah. We just do not have the financial model to make that work. So there we are, Cassell Coliseum, renovated, 9,000 attendance is about what it'll be.
It currently does, I think, 9275 is the number.
9275 roughly. Mike Young, the perfect coach to be here. Mike is all in. He loves the venue. He loves the home court advantage. So this will be a big win for Tech when we get it done, which Witt said yesterday, let's get it done and back in there within the 5-year window, which I believe we can.
Yeah, he was asked about schedule, and he said as fast as the funding can come in. And his hope was that it no more than 4 or 5 years. Yeah,
every building we do at Virginia Tech and every university I've ever worked for, we have a mixed bag of people liking the architectural renderings are just saying that looks ridiculous. What are you trying to do? We do have multiple committees at Tech that approve anything that we do to make sure it's cohesive with what's moving forward. So this will go through multiple checkpoints before we actually get a final rendering on it.
I like to think that I'm the kind of guy who like we've been talking about this stuff in recent years. Whit's been saying for years, $50 million for Cassell. He's dropped that here and there. So I've been talking about it and thinking about it for years, and so I've sat there at games and said to my buddy, well, they could do this or that, and man, what came out in the drawings, and I understand the ultimate the final project can change. That's beyond anything I would have envisioned, and the feedback is. That's really sharp, the way they kept the character of Cassell, particularly internally.
Right.
And still made it more modern. I just think they nailed it.
Well, you can see the concourses being pushed out to the arches. That's what's going to happen.
Right, and I've been saying that for years, just push the concourse, the exterior of the building out to the arches, but I didn't quite see it looking like that. It looks fantastic.
And $50 million won't get that done. That's $50 million privately.
Right. The other $25 million is probably going to be debt service on the suites.
Debt, other sources, but yeah, you're going to have to figure that out. And 75 may not get it done.
Correct.
So
yeah, naming rights, beyond what Carillion's
there's
already doing.
all kinds of interesting ways.
Well, and the nice part is there's an opportunity for all of the Tech Sideline members who are listening to contribute to this project, right?
Absolutely.
So if there's someone out there who has $75 million that they'd like to consider working through this project with us, Charlie and I are available at all times. Just let us know.
Our listenership and readership is,
well, UVA put up
affluent.
a wonderful facility, but they had a major donor that made that happen, and maybe that'll happen at Tech. We'll see.
Yeah, and I know you guys are working on it. So so let's see, what else did I want to say? So Pete Morris was kind enough to send some notes. So and this is an interesting note. What was made public was one of four to five different concepts that were boiled down into one that best demonstrates the aspirations for the look and feel of Cassell. Preliminary concepts have been met favorably by university planning, so that's good. They're not all seeing it yesterday for the first time and going, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
The thing about Cassell, and you had mentioned the cost of a new arena. For me, the thing I could never get beyond was where you're going to put it. That's a great location. And if one of the things you got to think about is your future fans, the students. If you had just, I remember hearing out of left field years and years ago that if Virginia Tech ever built a convocation center or a new basketball arena, it would be out on Chicken Hill because that's easily accessible from 460. Maybe that was, I've never been able to find documentation of that. But I remember thinking, you put the Coliseum out there and the students can no longer walk to the game. And so that's the other huge argument, underappreciated argument for just redoing what you've got is the location's prime.
Yeah, the students of the Cassell Guard, I mean, these students love what we've allowed them to do inside Cassell, and they like their section, they like the amenities of their section, they like how they can influence a game by being right behind the visitors.
Yeah, so I think
goal.
Brad's probably more dialed into that than a lot of people in the athletic department. So there's this discussion of, oh, you blew it. You should put student seating around the floor. And I used to be an advocate of that too, number one, because it looks a lot better on television. But I think the students have grown to like being behind the basket. What do you think, Brad?
So at one point, the student section in football was in the east stands.
Yeah, I remember that.
And now
there still are some students.
Correct.
In the east
but the north end zone is the place to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so thinking about it from a basketball standpoint, schools I've worked at, we've had students behind the baskets. We've had students on the sideline. We've had students in all capacities. I think what is overblown is that narrative never comes from the students. The students just want to show up, impact the game, and have a great time. Right? The narrative of where do they sit, the students don't care. You see this generation now, we're selling mobile tickets and mobile locations because that generation doesn't care that they sit in section 8, row A. They just want to be in the venue. And so it may not be as big of a deal as people are sort of inclined to think it is. It doesn't mean we're going to get it wrong, right? It means we want to give students the best chance to impact. And you think about when we played Duke a few years ago, and that was, I think, the first game that we did the Smithfield Bacon, missed 2 free throws, and everybody wins Bacon, right? And I think Jay Billis and McDonough may have been on the call, and they commented on the fact that our students were chanting Bacon. And they didn't know why,
They didn't
because
know why.
it wasn't in our game note prep, right? we didn't tell them what was happening, and so we ran over and told them in the middle of the game. And they said, "This is amazing," and that was behind the basket,
Yeah.
right? So it's not for students. It's about, can you have an impact? Can you be part of something that is exciting?
Yeah.
It's not about, am I sitting on the
Where
baseline
exactly
of the
am I
37-yard
sitting?
line, or it's not about any of that. It's about, am I with my friends? Have you made it easy enough for me to come? And then when I'm there, are you entertaining me? And if we can do that, if we can do those things, location for students it's not a driver of attendance for students. At that point, everything else is a driver of attendance for students. It's not, are my seats in a great location? It's, can I help be part of the environment?
Well, I think a lot of that probably comes from people of my generation, because I've studied this stuff. And when I was at Tech, there were, I don't think I'm getting this wrong, there were something like 4,500 or 5,000 student tickets. And they sold it back then, 2,000 to 2,500 season tickets, all to locals. Mm-hmm. And then the remaining couple thousand were, on a per game basis. And the students used to wrap like one complete side of Cassell Coliseum. So again, getting back to those of us of a certain age, that resonates with us. That's our memory. And back then, the cameras were opposite the students. They were, I believe, over on the lot one side. So yeah, it looked better on television. And yes, it was a wall of sound. But I think that's where most of the commentary comes from. And also, I think there's some romanticization of the Cameron Crazies and
Correct.
how they're right there. They can almost touch opposing basketball players when they're throwing the ball inbounds. So I think that all kind of contributes to that. But I don't think it's that relevant to students of today for the reasons that you listed.
It is not.
Yeah. So I did want to get into that. So let's talk about a couple. So we got 3 items left in the Reach for Excellence campaign that we haven't gotten into, and one of them that I feel was kind of tossed in, the Drive for 25, is part of it. And for those who maybe haven't heard the numbers, when the Drive for 25 was announced in December of 2016, I remember the number, 10,609 Hokie Club members. It's now 19,625. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Roughly.
In 4.5 years. Some of that was done through the reseating. The people call them seat licenses.
Yeah, the per seat giving model.
Yeah, there was a quick jump there when the per seat giving model was put into place, and that was all about I think that affected the big donors more. Brad, you've been doing a lot of stuff since you've gotten involved to bring in what I would call bodies, to get people in, even if all they're giving is $25 to $100.
So it's an open-ended question.
Now be careful. I know you can go on for 30 minutes,
and I'm not going to. I promise. I promise. I'm gonna heed the advice, and I'm gonna stick to the
one
point.
paragraph or less.
It really is a matter of, can we meet people where they are, and you've heard Charlie talk about it. It's about growing the base of support. It's not about asking someone to do everything. It's about asking everyone to do something. Whatever they can do, we'd like you to participate. And so when we really boil down, I'm really proud of our group. In the middle of a global pandemic, this year we've added 3,400 new Hokie Club members. Right? And so when you start to think about those numbers, imagine what's possible in a non-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And as things start to get back to some level of normalcy,
when you can actually have events, and participating in the event,
we're in the event
enters
business.
You into the Hokie Club.
We are in the event-driven business, and we haven't had the opportunity to have any of those in going on 15 months now. So once we're able to do the narrative that we've talked about with our staff and our team is, once we're able to do what we do and add what we've learned in the last year, that's where we're going to experience some pretty great moments and some pretty cool success. But it really is, it boils down, and I would use the first foray that we kind of went into this concept of, what if we did it differently? And what if we looked at it differently, was the virtual 5K that we hosted back in the summer. We had over 1,200 people register for that. 41 states were represented, 7 countries were represented, and the key stat of the whole thing, those stats are exciting and so much better than we expected. 682 of those 1,200-ish were new donors to the Hokie Club who had not purchased a ticket or donated in the previous 3 years. So there was an opportunity, and that's what really opened our eyes to the concept, and that's what led us to the Pledge per Touchdown campaign and the Commonwealth Cup Magnet campaign and the Popcorn Box campaign. On all of those campaigns, it was new people who raised their hand and said, hey, I don't live in Blacksburg. I don't live in Virginia. I don't even live in a bordering state. But I do love the Hokies, and I would like to participate. So it changes the narrative a little bit, and it changes how we think about donor growth, but it gives us an opportunity to try something that we haven't necessarily been focused on previously.
Yeah,
Tech has not done a great job of donor growth and building the base over the years, and we've talked a lot about that in the last 5 years. And we talked earlier about moving the number of participants up. And that's what the Hokie Club is doing a beautiful job of. And the more people that you can bring in, it's really the second gift. If you can get someone to make the second gift, about 78% of those people stay with you for the third gift and the fourth gift.
Nice.
But you got to get them in the door,
Correct.
Which is what they're doing, and then do a good job with them once they say yes, to get them to make that second. And the money's not important. It could be $5.
Right.
The important piece is you made a commitment and you made a second gift, and now you're part of the family, and you start to say, okay, I can do 100, and then maybe the next time you can do 500. So it's
in the education process.
And the education process.
Yeah.
The fact we need them.
Correct.
So let's do some educating. One of the more subtle and difficult to impart things, and probably difficult to build enthusiasm for, is scholarship endowments. So a lot of people don't even know what a scholarship endowment is. And what it means is universities as a whole and their athletic departments have endowments. And that is a pool of capital that has been donated. And that capital is itself is never used or applied. It sits and earns interest, or investment income is probably a better way to phrase it. So in the case of Virginia Tech Athletics, and Whit put a number on it yesterday, I thought it was about $65 million. He said $70 million yesterday. So over time, Virginia Tech has an athletic endowment of $70 million. And those capital funds never get spent on anything. What they do is they earn investment income. And in Virginia Tech's case, in recent years, that's averaged about 4.25% to 4.5%.
That's the payout on it.
The payout, yes.
The payout is about 4.5%. Yeah.
Yes. So that $70 million produces about $2.8 million a year,
Right.
that is used to pay for scholarships at Virginia Tech. Now, again, something a lot of fans don't know is that athletes don't go to school for free. It's free to them, but it's not free to the athletic department. So the athletic department has to pay the tuition, room and board, all of that for athletes. And in Virginia Tech's case, that scholarship bill every year runs, I believe the number is $17 million currently. It grew explosively there for about 10 to 15 years, and the growth has now slowed down a little bit. But it's about $17 million a year that the athletic department basically has to write a check to the university for that.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So $2.8 million of that is paid for by the endowment. So the university, the athletic department now has to raise the other 14.2 every year on an annual basis. And I wrote in our news article about the Reach for Excellence campaign, I said, some universities are fortunate enough that they have very large endowments. So let's take the case of the University of North Carolina. The last number I remember seeing for UNC is that their athletic endowment was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 million. If they are earning the same 4 to 4.5%, that means they're getting about $10 million in payout for their scholarships every year. And there's a subtlety to what they actually pay for that we'll get to in a second. But if they have the same bill, then their $17 million scholarship bill really only costs them $7 million a year, which at Virginia Tech is $14 million a year. So when you look at the two schools, and UNC brings in $110 million in athletic revenue and Virginia Tech brings in 96, it's what happens after that that's different. It's there's 7 million or 5 million less, I believe I outlined, that UNC has to spend every year. So that's 5 million they've got that you don't see if you're just looking at revenue figures. And the last thing I want to say is that, and I did ask Whit about this yesterday, and he again danced around it, that there is a state law change in North Carolina where every scholarship in the UNC and NC State, public university athletic departments, are billed at the in-state rate. So I did read an article that said this lowered NC State's athletic scholarship bill by something like $6 million a year. And in the case of NC State, that means they only pay to the university about $8 or $9 million a year, whereas Virginia Tech has to pay 17 minus the endowment earnings. So this is all a murky soup that isn't apparent just looking at the revenue figures. So I know it's difficult as fundraisers. It's easy to get people to donate to something that gets built. I imagine that, an endowment is what I call a long play. In our case, we're donating $100,000 to the comm department. And that is going to result in someday a student getting $5,000, a $5,000 scholarship, or it'll be spread amongst multiple students. And I will openly admit that I'd almost rather just pay for a kid to go to school every year than put all that or pay the $5,000 a year. I could do that for 20 years. I'm building something that's in perpetuity. So blah, blah, blah. Charlie, talk about and how it works, because what they're trying to do with building up the endowment is getting people to donate $100,000 a pop like we've done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that question. A couple of things. Guess what UNC does with the extra $5 to $10 million they have that we don't have?
Staffing and facilities.
Staffing, supplementing assistant coaches' salaries, retaining great coaches, building performance centers. So that is a disadvantage that people need to understand. We're trying to address that. This is probably a good place to talk about the endowment piece is important. We want to grow that. Our $70 million is not enough, but it's not the lowest in the conference by any means. What we're trying to do with this fundraising campaign, and I will not bore you with all the strategy. There are lots of strategies in place, and we do a lot of statistical analysis. And I can tell you, I could do a 3-hour session on just that. I won't. But to simplify it, what we're going to be asking our donor base and non-donor base to consider are 3 buckets. And so one bucket is you buy tickets. You get your parking. Some people might buy suites and tickets. We're asking you to do that in bucket 1. That's important. It's essential to the revenue that the athletic department runs on. But you are getting something for that. You are getting entertainment. You're making this decision to tailgate, and that's bucket 1. Bucket 2 is the current operating. We call that the annual fund in our business. But that's the current operating. That's bucket 2. And so we're going to be asking people and thanking them for their tickets. We're going to be asking them to consider a bucket 2 gift, an annual fund gift at any level. And bucket 3 is the capital piece. And capital is a word that we use interchangeably. Most people think of it as
buildings.
Yeah. But capital is also endowments. And so let's take Charlie. So Charlie might buy season tickets, and he gets his parking, and he gives $400 to the Hokie Club. That's bucket 1. Brad now is going to ask Charlie, thanking me for doing that. He's going to ask me to do a $1,000 annual gift for 5 years, $5,000 on top of the tickets. And he might approach me to do a $100,000 endowed scholarship for 5 years. So that'd be $20,000 a year. So now Brad has asked me to do $20,000 in the capital bucket, the endowment, $1,000 in the annual bucket, and the $1,500 I'm buying tickets. So now I'm giving Virginia Tech $22,500 on an annual basis. The high performance fundraising operations and the ones that are very successful, UNC as an example, is exactly what they do. And we just have to do a better job in all three of those buckets and help people understand what we're asking them to do, why we're asking them to do that, and thanking them for what they're doing, and being totally transparent with how their money's being spent. What I should have done if I had known you better when you came to make that gift, I would have said, Will, this is fantastic. Your annual commitment will build to $100,000, but while you are doing that, would you consider making an annual gift commitment of some thousands of dollars so that we could start awarding your scholarship in year 1 versus year 5? A lot of people say yes to that.
Yeah.
But you got to ask them.
It would have been just a little bit more to get the thing rolling.
Just a little bit more.
Right.
Could have gotten it rolling. Could have gotten you a student earlier. And Brad and his team are functioning. You might elaborate on how your team is going to jump on this 3 bucket and what that might look like.
Sure. So what is nice, and to Charlie's point, it's just finding, and we talked about it earlier, the concept of transactional, right? The concept of philanthropic and the concept of transformational. And transactional can apply into this ticketing space. We've added, in perfect irony, we added in a ticket sales and service team 2 months before we were no longer allowed to sell tickets last year. And so we've got this team now where I feel really, really great about our progress, quite frankly. And they were part of our outreach program for the Keep Jumping Fund and that initiative. They were part of our outreach for asking folks to keep their money with us last year. But this team we're going to turn on the jets, and they're going to handle our ticketing, sales, and service opportunities. What that means, and my background, I probably skipped over it a little bit in the beginning. I'm most comfortable in our industry in the marketing and ticketing space.
Right.
That's where I grew up.
Those are your roots.
That's where I started. And so this concept of selling out stadiums is not foreign to me. I've never worked at a place where I've shown up and the games were already sold out. I would love for that to be the case, but what's really exciting about what happens here is we get a chance to get back to that for people, and we get a chance to relive that. So that's that transactional component that Charlie spoke about. We've got a team of people working on that every day, and the hope and the goal and the strategy is to split our stadium in ways. And you've seen it. You saw it last year. We didn't get to execute it, obviously, but when we went through the reseat with different tiered pricing models, right? We're not a one size fits all solution anymore. So let's find different solutions and then let's execute against it. That's bucket A. Bucket B, this philanthropic annual fund, help us operate our day to day, right? Go above and beyond if you're capable and have the means to. Give us a little bit more, and we promise that we will be good stewards of that investment, but help us operate at a higher level. And then the transformational, what can you do that in your case, in the Tech Sideline Endowed Scholarship, what can you do to leave a legacy?
Yeah, once it's in place, it lives forever.
And you could have given $5,000 a year over 20 years and had 20 kids receive a scholarship. But at the end of your commitment, for the rest of time, 1 kid a year or 2 kids a year or 3 students a year will have access to the Tech Sideline Endowment.
Yeah.
Pretty cool thing when you think about what happens long after any of us are here.
It's pretty wild to think 100 years from now, somebody's going to be handing that out.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's going to be about 1% of tuition and fees.
But it's still there.
Exactly. And I use the analogy a lot. When I was in upstate New York, I lost sleep over the Hokie games. I listened and read the free boards on Tech Sideline. But nobody ever asked me for a gift. I wasn't a season ticket holder, nor would I be a season ticket holder. Nobody asked me to buy a hat. Nobody asked me to do anything. And so we now are going to be much, much better at getting to Charlie in upstate New York and letting him participate in the life of athletics. And that's what most of our fans want to do. They want to be a part of something at whatever level they can. We got a lot of fans that just buying season tickets is all they can do. They're raising kids.
Right.
They don't, and that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other people that can do that and more. And then maybe the season ticket holders in 20 years can think about an endowed scholarship. And that's what we're going to try to be better at going forward.
So I feel bad because we've been going a long time. It's 11:47 a.m. and I asked people on the message boards for questions, and I've gotten like 42 responses. Brad, are you capable of doing rapid fire answers?
Absolutely, I am.
All right, so let me scroll down this.
Jay Poole would when he listens, he'll be proud of me if I can do this.
So I see a couple of questions about along these lines. To entice younger, more mobile-friendly donors, will the Hokie Club turn on Venmo, Apple Pay, etc.? Or somebody else says text to donate as you're like walking in the football stadium.
So the short answer is yes, right? Rapid fire, the answer is yes. The long answer is it requires infrastructure to do it. So we're working with Charlie's team because there are systems that Charlie's team has in place that can accept some of those. The system that we currently have in place to do all of our ticketing software does not accept those. Right. There are ways around it. So that's what we're solving right now.
And part of the alignment is getting us aligned so we don't duplicate efforts.
Yeah. Time frame?
Soon.
This fall, I bet.
Yeah, it won't take very long. It literally, again, and Will, you alluded to it, data migration, right? It's simply making sure. What we don't want to do is have Will Stewart say, hey, I gave through Venmo and it doesn't link up. So we're in the process of testing everything right now. We just don't want to launch it until it is foolproof.
Because you're talking about people's money.
Correct. So we'd rather wait 3 weeks and make sure it works perfectly than launch it now and have bugs.
Yeah, I like to say we want to function like Amazon, not like the Pentagon. If you know what I mean there. Like we've got to be easy to access, easy to use, and friendly.
Yeah. We're getting ready to launch a new version of the Tech Sideline message boards, and that gives people great agitation when we say that. It's really the underneath has been completely reprogrammed and modernized, and on the top it's going to look the same. But it's just a message board, so we can launch it half-baked and get people to test it for us. When you're taking people's money, you got to get it right before you go public, or it creates a lot of work and a lot of anger. As alumni expand beyond Virginia, how can VT Athletics build closer ties with alumni in places like California, Texas, Florida, and New York? I think you've already indirectly addressed a lot of that, meeting them where they are.
Correct. With
like virtual events and offerings like the Mike Young popcorn thingy and
the other thing
like
there, just we had separate Hokie Club chapters and we had separate alumni chapters. Mm-hmm. There's no need for that in many places.
Right.
Let's merge. Let's get together. Let's have a combination of things happening together, and I think we're making great progress on that.
Agreed.
So the model of sending all the coaches out to travel around and visit all the different Hokie clubs, is that going by the wayside, Brad?
Not by the wayside, but
it's definitely been cut down.
It will evolve, right? Yeah. And if again, let's not look the last year in the mouth and forget what we learned. What we learned is that we can connect people through Zoom, right? We can do these things, and we can find a way to connect. So do we have to take someone in the middle of a recruiting cycle on a 3-day trip to go to 2 places? Not necessarily. We could do that in a morning, right? And it may not be the opportunity to sit in the same room and share a meal. That doesn't mean we're never going to do that. Yeah. It just means we can do it more frequently if we do it virtually, and then double down when we are in the same space. Right. So it's finding a way to merge. Again, it's merging historical success with future planning.
Yep. Will Cassell renovations include fixing the HVAC? Ask Charlie if he's ever sat in the top 10 rows.
I have sat there many times, and yes, it will fix that situation.
Now, the other question I've been asked: will it still have big ass fans?
I hope so.
And I'm not cursing. I'm not cursing gratuitously.
Hey, from Lexington, Kentucky, big ass fans.
That is the name of the brand.
But I loved the rendering with the ceiling the way it was. It was spectacular. So
yeah, very nice. Let's see. What will the first thing Fuente and the football program do with these resources when they start coming in?
So I think the easy answer to that is it's already happening, right?
That's true. It is. So some of the money's already coming in. And
we have a young woman on our staff, Sam Stewart, who is great, and she is working in our player development space. And she has been part of this conversation with former student athletes and forever Hokies, bringing everybody back. So it's already paying dividends.
And he's hired recruiting staff,
correct,
analysts. So he's moving with the resources that were put together early.
Yeah, we're not waiting.
Oh, let's see. Here's a very specific question. Do you plan to reinstate Hokie Club referral points to give incentive to those who already donate to recruit friends and family?
It's funny you should ask. We are testing out a product right now. We're soft launching it with a few people today, actually. It's supposed to go live around noon. And then we will roll that out to the masses once we have the bugs worked out. But it will be an easier function because we want to use. Here's what I would say to everybody. We want to take the charm of Southwest Virginia and multiply it by the technology of Silicon Valley. Right? That's the goal. We want to have Southern hospitality with California tech. And if we can do that, so thinking about a referral program, we will be successful if Charlie, the Hokie fan who lives in upstate New York, asks Will, his neighbor, who he also is a Hokie fan, who they watch games together, to join the Hokie Club. That will be success. We just have to make it easy for Charlie to do that. And that's what is being worked on right now. Again, soft launching today, and will come out at a more robust level, hopefully within the next 3 to 4 weeks once we get test and trial and everything.
Nice. So I want to ask this question, then I want to add an editorial comment. Here's one. How have you specifically addressed outreach to people who are supporters during the 10-win seasons but have stopped donating now? And that hits close to home for me because we get lots of emails that say, can you cancel my subscription? And I always say, well, we don't get lots of emails that say that. We get emails that request a canceling of the subscription. And I always ask, sure, why are you canceling? And the answer more and more frequently is, you guys do a great job. I think the football program's lost its way and I'm not interested. Do you encounter that in your work? And what do you do about that?
You're looking at me, and I'm going to get him to answer first, and then I'll add to it.
And this is rapid fire, right? So I'm trying to do my best. I promise. I mentioned before the digital strategy and innovation team that we have, and I mentioned the fact that we borrowed those concepts from the Orlando Magic, and some of our restructure. It's not based on other college athletics programs, right? Our reorganization is based on professional sports organizations, Fortune 500 companies, because they do it right. We have to acknowledge the fact that we are in a business, right? And our job is to run a business correctly and effectively. And then it's our job to give people the opportunity to celebrate with each other. That's the point. So when we think about, and I use the Orlando Magic as this example, they talk about the fact that what they've learned over the last few years is once people drop off from being a season ticket holder, they don't come back. They never return, which is a frightening concept, right? And what we have to do for a long time, we were season tickets or bust. That was the way to get into Lane Stadium, right? Using only Lane as an example, you had to buy a season ticket. There were smaller opportunities to get in through other means, but largely it was season tickets. What we have to do is, if you think about it like an escalator, we have to escalate you up, and then we have to give you an off ramp and help you escalate down, because a season ticket doesn't work for everybody. So if it's a 10-win reason, if it's a pricing reason, if it's a, hey, I moved, if it's my priorities have changed, whatever it is, we hear a lot from people, and the reality is the record is very rarely the actual cause of somebody no longer renewing a season ticket or joining the Hokie Club. It doesn't mean that we can't take advantage of victory, right? But we want to be built to where we can mitigate that and we can work through it with you. A lot of times it's price or it's priority. It's, hey, I've got a young family and I used to go to games with friends, but now I'm spending Saturday mornings coaching youth soccer.
Travel soccer.
Right. So it's being a season ticket holder is not in it for me anymore. What we have to do is still separate that and say, well, just because you're not a season ticket holder doesn't mean you can't be a contributor in the Hokie Club. It may look different. There may be a different set of benefits associated, but this is how we can do it. So trying to summarize, the goal is to make it easier for people to off-ramp when they need to. But instead of going off a cliff, we'd like you to just move into a different lane.
Don't completely lose
Correct.
them.
Don't lose them. Just move to a different lane, and let's acknowledge that you now, well, maybe what we have to do is a really great job of saying, okay, Will, you're coaching youth soccer on the weekends, but tell you what, we've got a Friday night game against UNC. You can come with your buddies for that night. And so let's target you and message to you, here's what Friday nights mean. It's not Saturday because you can't do Saturdays anymore. but we've got a Friday opportunity.
Yeah, and I just add, I'm a fan first. I want to win. I like to win. I think the coaches like to win.
Same.
I always say winning beats the hell out of losing.
It's a heck of a lot of fun to be on top. But what I say to people that are friends of mine and the non-athletic types is that football and basketball and athletics, they were important to us as undergrads. It was an experience that meant something to us. It's the economic engine of Southwest Virginia. Through ups and downs, we got to be there to support this really critical asset to Virginia Tech and to this region. And you got to stay with us. You can't just come in and out just because we win games. We've got to consistently. Now, we have to uphold our part of the bargain.
Absolutely.
We got to do a good job of stewarding people. We've got to be more transparent. We've got to do all the things the fan base needs us to do. But, boy, we got to stay with the program through ups and downs. It was a heck of a lot of fun in 1999 with Vic and being number 2 and number 1 possibly in the country. But, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so we have to stick with it.
And I will say that it's not like we have a mass exodus of subscribers on Tech Sideline. We've probably kept, I don't know, 95% of our people. And in my group of friends that go to games, nobody is saying, I'm not interested in going to games anymore. So that's a portion of the fan base, and they ask that question because, it is in their heads that way. So here is someone that I can tell has looked at future plans for the university, actually the university master plan that I referenced earlier. And this will be the last one. The empty land adjacent to Honhurst is marked for future athletic department building in the Virginia Tech University master plan. What plans or ideas does the AD have for that space? Is that even in anybody's wheelhouse, or is it just in a dusty old document somewhere?
It's not in a dusty old document because that new master plan is pretty fresh. That is prime real estate for the university, and that's primarily the tennis courts that get used a lot.
They do.
It's prime real estate for athletics. It's probably prime real estate for the academic side of the campus. There is no immediate plans for that space, although it's looked at all the time for different things. But right now it's being protected for recreational use. I think it will stay that way for a while. But it's obvious where it's located, it would attach to athletics.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people that are eyeballing it lustily, well, we could do with that.
Exactly.
My daughter's a freshman. She lives in Oshag, so she lives near. And so I'm always driving over and parking right next to the tennis courts to pick stuff off from her and hand stuff off to her. And there are still students there playing tennis. I think, has some of it been converted to skateboard stuff?
There's a roller hockey rink in the backside. So
yeah,
I think we looked at that for the performance center. If it's not mistaken, it's one of the possibilities. I love where they put it.
Yeah, it's a little bit too far away.
It's a little too far.
Yeah. I know that tennis isn't as big a thing as it was, when you and I were young. Oh man, we all played tennis and watched tennis.
Yeah.
But it's you're right. It's still getting used. So, gentlemen, thank you for coming on. That ran long. We'll try to slice and dice it up into digestible elements for people, both in the audio and video and written words.
Really appreciate, Will, what you do for Virginia Tech and for athletics. And I'd be amiss if I didn't ask the fan base, to help us. We need your help.
Yeah.
It's a personal ask for me, but give what you can. It's $5. That's great. We need it. So thanks.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate you coming on. Brad, anything else you want to add?
Nothing that isn't already been said. I have the gift of being able to fill the space sometimes.
We did say a lot.
So we appreciate everybody's work, right? And we appreciate everybody's commitment to this, and we're really excited about where we're going. And that I hope that what people have seen between yesterday and between what's going on, we're committed to this at the entire university-wide level, and it's going to be a really exciting ride.
Yeah, and I read the message boards, so hold us accountable. Hold us accountable to this.
Be nice, be firm, but be nice.
That's right.
So Malcolm, can you turn Brad's camera on, please? Because we haven't talked about the shoes.
Hey, Somebody has to have them, you know.
So what tell me about I don't know anything about shoes. So
The Jays. So these, honestly, I ended up finding these on a website. They only had one size that happened to be my size, and through our Nike arrangement, and got them right before the home opener, which was supposed to be with UVA. And then when that got postponed, had them and waited. First day I broke them out of the box was the NC State game, and that obviously went our way. And so Fu said, you can't take them off. You have to wear them from now on. So
you wore your good luck charm to the
absolutely
TSL podcast.
Absolutely.
Is that basically a replica of the original Air Jordans? Is that what that is? Yeah.
Because
I remember when those came out in the mid 80s. And I thought, well, who in the world's going to pay $100 for a pair of shoes? That's ridiculous. Because Converse Weapons, which were big back then, were $35 pair of shoes. The entire Virginia Tech basketball team was wearing Converse Weapons. I think the entire NCAA was wearing Converse Weapons.
Yeah, you're dating yourself.
Well, you can see pictures of Magic Johnson playing for the Lakers wearing Converse Weapons. And but those $100 shoes came out, and I thought, no way. And
so now they're $250.
Yeah, so the rest is history. All right, thank you, gentlemen. So that was episode 177 of the Tech Sideline podcast, our first maskless episode since the pandemic began. So I appreciate it, guys, and we'll see you. We'll see everybody next week. We'll go back to live streaming on Monday with episode 178. Thanks for watching and listening.